Hi, I'm Pastor Brenda, and I'm really glad to meet you in this space. We're going to be doing a three-part series. It's all going to be on the story of the Transfiguration, which is like a difficult story. It's kind of weird. It's a lot of supernatural, a lot of what's going on here stuff. And so we tackled this in one of our Sunday night Bible studies. We do this thing called an all questions Bible study where we just bring our questions about something. And this was one of the choices. This was voted upon by people in our church. And we just brought in our questions. And actually, we had 65 questions overall. You can find these on our website. There's a resource there for you. And from those 65 questions, we're going to do this three-part series, taking a look at one story, but looking at it with different angles and truth from what this weird supernatural story has to teach us. So be ready for some many aha moments, because I'm going to guess that our questions, which is something we've talked about in our Bible series, our questions lead us to the truth. And these questions about this one odd story led us to a lot of truth. So are you ready? I'm going to read to you in the first part of this series from the book of Matthew. The stories in all three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, have the same story, almost close to the same version every time. But let's just begin with Matthew's version. 6 days later, it's Matthew 17. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the two brothers, James and John, and led them up a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed so that his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, "Lord, it's wonderful for us to be here. If you want, I'll make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But even as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. Listen to him." The disciples were terrified and fell face down on the ground. Then Jesus came over and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." And when they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus. As they went back down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." All right? This is what I mean by kind of a weird supernatural story. So this is where we began, and this is where 65 questions came from. I'm just going to give you some of the rabbit trails that we went down to and where the story could take your mind. Why did Jesus choose Peter, James, and John? Why did Jesus bring anyone at all to this moment? Why did the clothes glow? Did the body glow through the clothes? Is this a reference to white robes in heaven? Why did Peter say it was wonderful to be there? Why was Peter the only one to say anything at all? Why was this mountaintop experience for Peter still not enough to prevent him from denying Jesus? And Elijah and Moses? So, the Bible has this supernatural through line quite a bit. I mean, it's written by all these different authors, and there's 66 books, and it's written over a couple thousand years, and yet you'll see these through lines through the entire Bible. We just did a series on trees, and the through line of trees, and how God always marked the time when he called people to him by a tree. It's an amazing series. You can find it on a YouTube channel. And this is also true with mountains. So whenever you see a mountain in the Bible, know that this is a time where God is going to come down and meet with the people. And this mountain thing may be because back in this, BC time, when the gods were the gods of nature, or the gods that explain nature, that what happened on top of mountains when clouds came down, maybe that's where this image came from. It kind of makes sense for that time, but also know that throughout the entire Bible, whenever you read about a mountain, you're going to notice this is where God came down to be with man. So this is your first question of the night. Can you name all the many times where there are mountains and stories about mountains and what happens on mountains throughout the Bible? Have that conversation, hit pause, and I'll be waiting for you right here. I'm sure you had a good conversation, and I'm sure you didn't even name all of the stories with mountains in them because there are so many. But when you start reading the Bible in whole, look for this through line of mountains. It's amazing. So when we read here in all three tellings of the story that Jesus led them up a mountain to be alone, be ready because God is going to come down and meet them. And just to kick it up a notch, here comes Moses and Elijah too. Now, do you realize the highest mountain in all of Israel is only 1,900 feet? So maybe this is more metaphor. Maybe this mountain, which is really more like a hill, is more of a metaphor of God meeting us where we are on these mountains, but it's a rich, rich metaphor. So maybe you brought this one up. When Abraham took Isaac up the mountain for a mystery sacrifice, in Genesis 22:14, Abraham did this. Abraham named the place Yahweh Jireh, or Jehovah Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Some people love that name of God, the Jehovah Jireh God, or the Yahweh Jireh God, for God to provide for them. And here it happened on top of a mountain. I mean, do you think when God called Abraham to go up a mountain, he already had it in his mind that God was going to meet him there somehow, some way? Because that's what the gods do. That's what this God has done. Maybe. Then we got David, who poetically writes in the Psalms. This is Psalm 24, 1-3. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all its people belong to him. For he laid the earth's foundation on the seas and built it on the ocean depths. Who may climb to the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? Right there, where God meets. So when David cries out to God and he says in Psalm 3, verses 3-5, but you, O Lord, are a shield around me. You are my glory, the one who holds my head high. I cried out to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy mountain. God hears you in that place where God meets us. Then verse 5, I lay down and slept, yet I woke up in safety, for the Lord is watching over me. I love that beautiful picture there. And Psalm 18, this is my favorite psalm. David is just devastated. Life hasn't turned out the way he thought it would, and he is devastated. And it's a very long psalm of his crying out to God, doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what to think, feels abandoned. And yet, David has all these beautiful metaphors of how God, I love this, how God stoops down to take care of him. I love that verse. But Psalm 18, 32-33 says, God arms me with strength, and he makes my way perfect. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, enabling me to stand on mountain heights. David is doing more than standing here. This is coming near the end of that psalm. David is more than just finding his hope again. He's declaring that he's meeting with God again. Out of his devastation when he was hopeless, God did meet him. God did stoop down and meet him. And now he can stand on that mountain place and meet with God again. Because this is our larger story, God. So you know this to be true. We can meet with God under trees. Those are holy moments. We can meet with God on mountain paths. We can meet with God through music. It is hard to meet with God in the noisy parts of our life, right? We need to find those mountain times, those tree times. And the disciples here, they got the story of a lifetime by going on this hike up a mountain with Jesus. So question, talk about this amongst yourself. This was a question we had in our Bible study. What do you think Peter, James, and John and Jesus talked about on the way up the mountain? And what do you think they talked about on the way down the mountain? On that mountain hike, up and down, what do they talk about? Have that conversation, hit pause. I'll be right here. All right, so now let's dive in a little bit and talk about what happened up on that mountain when God came down and meet them. Moses and Elijah showed up. Why those two? But first, I have one more question for you. This is kind of a fun question, but I think you should have this conversation. If you were on a mountaintop and could meet with anybody in the Bible, who would you like it to be? Maybe you've had this question before at a party or something. Still, let's think. Who would you like to talk and meet out of the Bible on top of a mountain? See you in a bit. Pause. All right. So intentionally, Moses and Elijah were given the privilege to meet with Jesus. Why these two? Also, how did Peter, James, and John know they were Elijah and Moses? That was also one of our questions. How did they know who they were, right? Well, Moses was the law bringer. He was not the lawgiver, because we know that is who God was. And where did Moses get that law? Oh, yes, on top of a mountain, right? So in John 1:17, it says, "For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ." So was this a scene where Moses was actually handing over the law to Christ? And then there was Elijah, and he's representing all of the prophets that foretold of the Messiah's coming. But why Elijah? I would think the choice should have been Isaiah, because he's got the longest book of all the prophets. He has so many prophecies about the Messiah in the whole book of Isaiah that you would think he would be like the seniority, the one that talked about the Messiah and the promises that are being fulfilled through the life of Jesus. But no, Elijah is chosen. And this was an aha moment. We had, again, this is groupthink from a Bible study that's leading me in this message. This groupthink aha moment was Elijah chosen because he was one who did not die? If you know the story of the prophet of Elijah, he was taken up into heaven by the chariot of fire. 2 Kings 2:11 says, "As they were walking along, Elijah and Elisha, walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separating them, and Elijah was carried up by a whirlwind into heaven." Then we all start singing, "Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home." That's where that spiritual comes from this moment. So, was Elijah there to tell, remind, or confirm to Jesus that, yes, you are the Messiah coming, you are this promised Messiah? And this is why he was chosen it. An interesting note about mountains again and the death of Moses. Because he did die, but it wasn't a normal death also. So Deuteronomy 32:48-50 says, "That same day the Lord said to Moses, 'Go to Moab, to the mountains east of the river, then climb Mount Nebo, which is across from Jericho. Look out across the land of Canaan, the land I'm giving to the people of Israel as their own special possession. Then you will die there on the mountain. You will join your ancestors just as Aaron, your brother, died on Mount Hor and joined his ancestors.'" See that? God meeting Moses on the mountain yet again. And then it says in 34 verses 5-6, So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, just as the Lord had said. The Lord buried him in a valley near Beth Peor in Moab, but to this day no one knows the exact place. So like Elijah, Moses didn't have a normal death. So is that why they were chosen? Now you would think maybe Elijah in that chariot of fire was carried off in his death on top of a mountain. But actually that story says it happened on the beach of the Jordan River. So yeah, God can meet you at beaches too. Just wanted you to know that. So in the story, the voice of God is heard again, like at the baptism of Jesus, with the very similar words. This is my dearly loved son who brings me great joy. Listen to him. And when God's voice from heaven said about Jesus, listen to him, this indicated that the law and the prophets must now give way to Jesus, who will replace the old way with the new way. He is the completion of the law and the fulfillment of the prophecies in the Old Testament. Because Jesus perfectly fulfilled the prophecies of old, and Jesus kept the law as no man had ever done before. Wow. Big thought right there. And these 3 disciples, they got a front row seat to all of this. And then Jesus tells them to not tell anyone until the Son of Man has come, been raised from the dead. There's so much they didn't understand. Another question from the Bible study. Did the 3 not tell anyone at all because they couldn't tell? Or could they not help themselves? And maybe they told the other 9 disciples. Maybe they at least told their wives, because how could you not tell what just happened on that mountain? And another really big thought. Jesus teaches them here about the resurrection of the dead is coming. And here they saw Moses and Elijah. I bet they didn't get that until later. But they just saw the resurrection of the dead on that mountain. Now, there's so much more in the story that's going to be shared in the next lesson. So for now, I just want you to go tell it on a mountain. Go sing that Christmas carol. Because something happened there on that mountain, right? Something happens when God meets with us. So may your life find places to meet with God, whether they're under trees, whether they're on mountain paths, whether they're sitting looking at a mountain on your computer screen, or may you have a painting on your wall and you look at that mountain and you hear God's voice speak to you. And may you get these aha moments, new thoughts, overwhelming thoughts. But may you meet with God. And may the noise in your life go away for a time. And we all say to this, Amen. I'll see you again.